Okay, so in this video, I plan to give a comprehensive understanding of modern memes through these four authors, namely Limor Shifman and her two papers from 2013 and 2014, Stevka Hristova, I think that's right? Yes, from 2014, Farouk El Maruf from 2024, and Glenn Anderell from also 2024. I'm sorry if I butchered any of their names. And following this analysis, we're going to be looking at first off, we're going to see how this manifests in the real world through some of the more recent memes, I guess, to tie the abstractness of these concepts together using real life examples. And then we're going to be analyzing how memes could or could not facilitate political engagement through the Arendtian concept of the polis. Okay, so first off, we're going to need to explain, we'll create a baseline on what memes are and how they function in today's world. So here I've got these papers, and each one I've kind of used to address a particular facet of memes and their behavior. So this is like the first question you see below the title. So Shifman, I'm gonna address how memes work, more importantly how they behave and how they spread, especially within online spheres. Hristova, I'm gonna address how memes carry and distort information. With Maruf, I'm going to be asking how memes shape emotional experience, and with Andra, I'm going to be asking how do memes shape identity and belonging. All four of these papers, I'm kind of like delineating them and like giving them their own separate area, but the truth of the matter is that like they agree with each other on a lot of what memes are and how they behave. I want to focus on more like the unique directions from which each paper looks at the issue of memes and how they function in modern society. All right, so Shifman and Hristova, you might notice that their papers were published way earlier than El Maruf's and Anderell's, and now I include these still because I feel the way they address memes is very unique and worthy of analysis alongside these two from more modern eras. So maybe you can think of it as like seeing whether the theories from 11 or 12 years ago still hold together in modern day, that sort of thing. Now in 2013 and 2014, the study of memes and their culture was in its infancy, because given how niche it was, given how online it was, especially among the younger demographics, memes were not considered worthy of being studied. And it was, I think Shifman in her papers intended to put forth a way for memes to be academically analyzed. Now that's like the overall concept. Hristova is more like the other three papers in that her paper is more addressing political effects of memes. All right, enough stalling. Let's get to actually explaining what each paper tells us. So memes can spread through the sharing and reposting. So when a meme's posted on the internet, it goes to the audience, it goes like through social media, and each time the viewer, say I'm the viewer of the meme, I look at it, I find it's funny, I want to share with my friends, so I share with my friends via reposting, via any sort of social media actions. And sometimes this doesn't change the meme itself. However, if I see a meme and I find it potentially valuable for communicating some other message that the meme in that format did not, like say I find a meme speaking to like climate change, and I find that there is some potential within these three, which is what Shifman gives as ways to analyze memes, like the content, the format, and the stance. I find some potential within this that can be restructured to speak to some other issue, like an ongoing war, for example. So I'm changing some part of the meme to focus not on like climate change anymore, but on the war in Ukraine maybe. And then I can put that altered meme out to my friends, and then they'll share it, and maybe they'll modify it for their own purposes as well. So it is this idea of maybe mutation that describes the idea of me editing this meme and then sharing it, and others editing that as well. So memes are constantly changing, constantly evolving. And plus, the virality of meme depends on its environment. So this goes partially into, the constant evolutions of memes. So you may hear from the internet about like Gen Z memes or millennial memes or boomer memes, and this is all due to the constant evolving of what society thinks is funny, and that tells a lot about the environment in general and so forth. That'll be discussed later in one of the other papers. But know that if we're not talking about real life environment, we're talking about digital environment, like the audience, so to speak. If the audience doesn't find a meme funny, the word cringe comes up often, right? So cringe basically means that like the humor expressed in this case a meme is not compatible with, it doesn't match with, doesn't vibe with, I guess, the current state of humor within the audience. Yeah, so if a meme matches the humor that is in vogue right now, then it has a much greater chance to become viral than one that just is like dated or like just doesn't match the humor of that is popular right now. And Shivman also goes into detail on the meme genres. So we already discussed that memes constantly evolve and mutate, right? And it would kind of be the case that memes would spread randomly, or like they would evolve randomly. Like biological evolution kind of is random. Like the understanding of evolution is that there isn't any factor that decides what mutation to put in where. It's mainly up to just randomness, and then the compatibility with nature decides whether that mutation will stay. And kind of the same thing is here, except this genre of memes is what separates biological evolution from mimetic evolution. So in essence, genres persist because they allow for the easy manipulation and alteration of memes. And a very popular one has been image macros. And I'll just draw one here. So it would be an image or a GIF or a video, and then here would be top text and bottom text. So yeah, there's an image here. I'm just gonna say person. And then here's like text here, and that's what an image macro is. Now, the reason why image macros have become so popular is that they are very, very easily changed. You can modify the text, you can modify the image, and now all of a sudden there's huge potential for communicating whatever message you want on there. This gives you like extreme freedom, and that's why this genre of meme, known as the image macro, has become so popular, and also why there is some sort of structure in meme evolution, in that although it mutates and evolves, it does so within the constraints of this genre that allow such propagation. And this kind of goes in tandem with something called hypercompression, right? And so you see in this image macro, there is very limited space. You only have like top text, which mainly only supports like 1 or 2 lines, and the bottom text as well, and the image. So you can only put in very little information in a meme like this. And this kind of goes for all genres of memes, in that given the very short form attention span of the internet, you need, like, virality depends on environment. It also kind of depends on understanding. If an audience can understand your meme quickly, that kind of like boosts its virality, because it appeals to that short form entertainment. But the effect is that any nuanced political, social problems that you're trying to communicate with a meme will inevitably have their complexity greatly reduced, because there is just not enough space in the meme in order to properly convey that much information. And this all results in a conflict, this issue just kind of being distorted, not represented to its fullest extent. And we're going to get to that in Christova's paper, but this hypercompression is a major part of kind of why memes are popular. It's like that short form, engagement, but it also is one of the biggest like pitfalls for when memes try to actually spur meaningful engagement. Now, Christova's paper talks about how memes carry and distort information, and this kind of goes back to hypercompression, namely, yes, in greatly reducing the complexity of any political issue and just like cutting out any unnecessary detail. And Christova's paper goes a lot into a specific instance in which this Occupy meme, which aimed to fight socioeconomic inequality, which they perceive as being concentrated in the very richest people and leaving the populace at large left in like poverty and injustice and all this. And that's a very complex issue and a very complex movement that they are trying to encourage. And memes in that context did not carry that complexity using hypercompression. What they did, instead of accurately conveying the movement's goals, was to focus on their slogans and their symbols. And the most easily targeted is the "We Are the 99," which is kind of like a slogan of like solidarity. So yeah, the "We Are the 99" creates a community of solidarity and kind of encourages backing of this movement through the sheer number of people that have been marginalized by this socioeconomic injustice. However, memes took that slogan and kind of treated it as face value. So you would see like instances of people mocking the slogan by like pointing to maybe other issues that were like heavily parodying, that were just not important. I remember the South Park, there was a South Park episode in which they mentioned "We Are the 99," but like it was just totally like meaning this like movement within the South Park school. I don't know the school's name, of course. It was this movement within the South Park school that just turned out to be heavily trivial, just like not very like meaningful, especially not in the same way that Occupy was trying to portray it. And it just takes away the meaning within the meme sphere. It takes away the meaning and the complexity of the original slogan and of the whole movement as well. And within this meme community, this sharing of Occupy memes, there's this illusion of participation in which you feel like you're involved in a community through sharing, reposting, and editing memes. But this is merely like unimpactful participation. So in the illusion of participation, you feel like you're engaging with the community through sharing, reposting, and editing memes, but you are merely you aren't really doing anything regarding the Occupy movement as a whole. Like the Occupy movement sought to enact genuine participation in this political change, but if you are on the internet and you're merely just posting and editing memes, you are not participating in that actual political change. You are merely participating in the online sphere where such where such sharing of memes just doesn't have any impact, especially regarding the Occupy movement in general. In the Occupy example, the members of Occupy were oppressed by the Obama administration, and there were memes that circulated because of this oppression, and that hints at the trivialization of violence. So you would see memes of this political violence happening, but it would not evoke sympathy for the it would not, well, of course, there's hyper-compression involved here. They do not portray the political violence to their greatest and most true extent. They merely, they trivialize it, but they also steered away from genuine concern, from, worry, to humor because of this prioritizing feeling mainly humor, mainly comedy and parody over, what's actually happening. And finally, the sheer magnitude of memes, the sheer amount of memes that were circulating throughout the internet simply rendered the what was going on with Occupy, just buried under loads and loads of parodies. So an internet user would not really come to understand the actual stance of Occupy, even if they were online quite a bit, because these memes simply tend to just outcompete information that regarded the true nature of the Occupy movement. All right, and here with El Marouf's paper, we have the question of how memes shape emotional experience. And so this is the first of the papers that is much more recent, and here he describes something called the post-digital, which I find very relevant here. Namely that society now is in the post-digital, and it is characterized by the digital and real spheres being so integrated that the digital sphere is just an inextricable part of daily life. And in the boundary between real and digital, you have the memes. And see, like, memes are not restricted to the digital sphere anymore. They are spreading to real life. They are having real impact on the real life. And a big part of this post-digital sphere is the growing anxiety and hopelessness of younger generations, particularly Gen Z people, in seeing the growing problems and the mounting issues that they have to face in this world. Specifically, like societal and political inequality, climate change. All these issues kind of define the appearance and the behavior of memes as now. So this goes back to environment. The post-digital and this anxiety and hopelessness is kind of what the modern environment is, and thus what determines virality in this modern atmosphere. And because of this anxiety and hopelessness, what you have is kind of this absurdity with humor, and this humor kind of bridges nonsense and actual sense. It's very confusing. So in this post-digital sphere, the meme itself is not the humor, but what it references. In a big way, it references this political event in a way that kind of is absurd or just doesn't make sense, especially to people who are out of the loop. And so you will see often humor that kind of can freely go into topics that were previously seen as a bit too far. And this is what I mean by taboo topics. Here, like, you would have offensive memes, memes that are kind of geared towards discussing issues that kind of that discuss issues in a way that wouldn't be seen as appropriate. And a large part of this, it lies in the catharsis. So humor, especially in this post-digital sphere, is very absurd. It kind of like muddles meaning, and all this results in the carnivalesque effect, where humor is made from disaster and all these events, because it is the society's way of coming to terms with the issues that are coming about, and the hopelessness. So yeah, I think that would be all I have to say on that. And finally, we have Anderau. So in here, Anderau's paper mainly answers the question of how memes shape identity and belonging, especially within modern meme culture. So I remember talking about in El Marouf's paper the concept of being in the loop. Like, if you were not in the loop, you would just see these absurd memes as being just like very inappropriate, very potentially even harmful. But that all depends on the in-group and out-group dynamic. So memes are a lot like jokes, in that the sharer of the meme gives it to the audience in kind of like this gamble that they will understand. And if the audience understands, you have this building of intimacy and community between the sharer of the meme and the audience. And that kind of creates a community, but it also creates two zones, right? So me and the audience have now just created this zone where we understand ourselves, where we understand the joke, and then the outside, where people don't understand the joke. So yeah, that is what building community through understanding means, in that you have this in-group that does understand the joke and thus has this interpersonal community, but the outside does not. And this comes in tandem with what is called the hermeneutical response, which is like mainly coming about in relatable memes, where memes find a way to articulate some part of the human experience that was not previously explained in such a way, and that also builds community through like this collective understanding. So there's that social phenomenon going on, but there's also a more harmful aspect to this building of community, in that it's being applied to political sides. And this goes back to hypercompression as well, where it is impossible for a meme to accurately represent one political side or the other using a meme. And so what this begets is, like, whether intentionally or accidental, a meme will not represent a political side accurately, but you create a straw man of it. So it simplifies a political side down to just a few key points that are chosen to maximize the efficiency of the meme regarding virality. But then, if a straw man of a political side is created in a meme and that meme is shared throughout, you can't really combat the straw man of your political side through merely like trying to clarify or explain it, because as we see, there's a burial of actual issues, and like your attempt at accurately explaining the concept is simply just washed out by the sheer deluge of memes. So pretty much the only way to combat a straw man of your political side is to create a straw man yourself of the other political side. And that goes on, like they create a straw man of us, we create a straw man of them, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And you have a meme warfare here where it's just constant, it's like constant memes, and all this is just shallow discourse. Remember, none of this is actually painting the issue in its true light, and of course no deep discussions can actually pierce through the noise. And finally, there is propagation, in that memes are not treated as the source of factual information, but still are used as the basis of moral testimony, namely that we create opinions based on what we see in memes. If I see a meme that bashes Trump, I'm gonna think, like, I'm gonna be influenced by that meme to say that, you know, Trump is bad, or Trump is corrupt, or all this. And that is an example of like a moral testimony, in that I now have the opinion that Trump is bad solely because there's a meme that but like tells me that. And you know, this whole thing goes back to political sides, where like people can be conditioned by memes to have these opinions, even if they're not based on fact. And even though these moral testimonies can be the drive for further knowledge gaining through searching the internet for actual factual information, you can't really depend on that when there's all this meme warfare, where there's all this noise going on. Okay, so in this second section, I will look at recent memes, very recent memes, and see how they connect to the more abstract theories of memes that we have just looked at. So on the left, I'm going to focus on 6-7, so to speak. And this is what I like to call slogan, in that, like, you know, people say it often. And I'm borderline calling it a cognito hazard, simply because when you see the numbers 6 and 7, you're kind of compelled to say, you know, 6, 7, and then do the hand motions and whatever. And this is kind of similar to the previous versions of like these slogans, like yellow car. Like if you're driving down a highway and you see a yellow car, you would say yellow car. And if you were to hear the words Among Us, or if you were to like see something that resembled an Among Us character, you would say Among Us. And of course, there's the very old ones like 69 and 420. Kind of like, you know, they have obvious like sex and drug related meanings. And of course, whenever you see them, you would be like, oh, that's 69 and that's 420, you know? These are very old ones. I think the most recent of these is the Among Us meme. But I feel that these four kind of differ from 6, 7 and more of the recent slogans, because 6, 7 and its many related memes are kind of divorced from their original meaning. Whereas here, like Among Us was always tied to the game Among Us itself, and 69 was always tied to its sex-related meaning. That's what made it funny. Whereas here, 67, people will often say that, you know, it came from song, it came from this, it came from that. It doesn't really matter where it came from. Its meaning has just boiled down to nothing. And now, its main appeal, the reason why it's still going is because it takes advantage of this in and out dynamic. So you would think of, like, say for example, a kid in a school sees the number 67 just somewhere out there, and he points to it and he tells his friend, you know, 67, and the friend says 67 back. And then remember, in Andor's paper, this kind of getting the joke constitutes a sense of intimacy, right? And I feel like that's kind of part of the reason why 67 has become popular. It's a very easy way for these communities to spring up over something that they understand or like have exposure to. Whereas someone from the outgroup, like the teacher, would not understand it and thus not be part of that in-group. And in fact, there were articles here that just said, like, teachers combat the 6-7 meme by misusing it and like trying to include themselves within it by using the 6-7 meme themselves, even though they're part of the outgroup. And that is kind of what makes the joke not funny anymore, because it's a breach or invasion of this boundary between the outgroup and the in-group. You know, someone from the outgroup isn't supposed to understand or use this 6-7 meme, whereas all the ones in the in-group like kind of are united by their understanding of 6-7. So, yes. And of course, memes are constantly evolving. So here, 6-7 is kind of going towards a different number, 41. And I haven't researched about why that's popular, but it seems to be something that is very similar to 6-7 in that it's basically just got no meaning and is kind of a slogan in that sense. All right, and here we come to Kirkification, right? So Kirkification is the use of AI to replace faces in images with those of Charlie Kirk. All right, and this came about in the weeks and months after Kirk's assassination, and I'm going to be discussing the AI meme itself here, but also I want to look at specific facets of the assassination itself, because some of them are related to the spread of memes and their behavior in modern culture. I'm gonna discuss that here, right? So, Kirkification has its appeal in this sort of tragic event, this memeing of a tragic or disaster event, and this was something that El Maruf discussed. I think it was his whole article was about how memes operate in this sort of disaster event, in that the modern meme kind of gets its appeal when it crosses its line. This crossing of this line between appropriateness and inappropriateness is representative of the absurdity, you know, the carnivalesque effect that underscores how memes operate in this modern society. And remember, we said that the state of memes nowadays is the product of having to come to face with all these different daunting tasks that the new generation has to fix. And here, like, they attain catharsis. The new generation attains catharsis by laughing at these tragic events, because it is kind of a way to stave off emotions, kind of like in the spur of the moment. And the viability of a joke, kind of like the virality of the joke, is kind of amplified when it memes on something that is deeply, deeply tragic. And I feel that is part of the reason why the meme of Kirkification spread so much, because multiple things are in play here. After Kirk's assassination, Charlie Kirk was essentially venerated by the right-wing media. And in fact, there was a use of AI by the right-wing media to portray Kirk in heaven and around among these other martyrs. And it's deeply, deeply ironic to take someone that's like up among the heavens and just bring them down to like this whole slew of memes that just mean nothing and are like perpetuated everywhere. It is like this cataclysmic, let's be honest, level of difference between the two is something that will generate huge amounts of virality within the modern culture. And here, like 6-7, this Kirkification thing means nothing in regards to, like, you know, its origins and what it's supposed to say about the modern political sphere or whatever, because these Kirkification memes are kind of shared just like the originals, like the original images. Kind of the humor behind this is around the absurdity of seeing Charlie Kirk's face when it's supposed to be someone else. This sort of irrationality of that is kind of what makes it funny. Okay, and here we come to the motivations and the details behind the assassination itself. And I think this is really cool because it kind of represents a manifestation of the modern culture in general and meme culture in the actual real world event. So Tyler Robinson was the assassin of Charlie Kirk, and the bullets he used to shoot Charlie Kirk were engraved with a bunch of memes. And all throughout this time following the assassination, everyone on both sides of the political spectrum are kind of like looking for details, right? Was he a Goiper, which is like a far-right group? Or was he like part of this liberal group? I remember people were speculating that his partner had like said some stuff that was deeply praising Biden, but then it turned out to be like deeply ironic. And it's like, is he right? Is he left? Who do we blame? Right? It's always that blame game that's always happening. But here, we're transcending left and right politics. It's not as simple as to say that Tyler's part of the left or the right. It's mainly that this was all a product of a society that's becoming more and more nihilistic. It's becoming more and more doubtful of the state of society and the state of politics, and it's becoming more and more ingrained into the online sphere. Remember, the in-group and out-group led kind of to this community. Remember this community that was knit together over the understanding of a certain joke. In the online world, this kind of leads to niche communities that are deeply and deeply online. And some parts of this, some articles even describe the assassination as something like a shitpost, in which it's an act that disrupts the conversation, that kind of sucks all the oxygen out of it, and is just done for the sake of this, for the sake of disrupting it. It adds no substantial part to the conversation. And part of this is all about the fracturing of society as a whole from like this unified thing. Even when online, it used to be unified, and then it splinters off into many different communities, precisely due to this in-group out-group dynamic, in which all these communities are formed based on this communal understanding of a certain joke or a certain game or whatever. And this is in tandem with the irony of the meme culture. We already discussed that here, the post-digital, where sincerity just does not exist, and where the carnivalistic effect, where the tragic events are rendered absurd by memes. That's kind of what's going on here. But also because people find the sense of community, of togetherness, not in the real world, but in these niche communities. And a big part of that is because conventional narrators do not seem to represent them. And by conventional narrators, I mean, your traditional news outlets like CNN and MSNBC and whatever. People are just not tuning into these kinds of, like traditional news sources because they find that these niche communities speak to them better overall. But that means that these niche communities also create a sort of echo chamber where their own views and only their views are kind of espoused and like trained within the community, and then any sort of dissent against that sort of opinion is kind of silenced. So this is the last section where we finally get to compare the Arendtian notion of the polis against modern memes. Now, I want to use the polis because I want to use the Arendtian notion of the polis because it is kind of a standard that we can use to represent what political action looks like. What does it mean for meaningful political action to appear? Like, what needs to happen? All right. And if you've done your reading on Arendt's works, you might come away with a deeper understanding based on what we have here. All right. So each line here, separated by dotted lines, is kind of difference between polis and memes. And I'll go through each one, and then at the end, we'll draw our overall conclusions. Okay, so first off, the polis and this is one of the most important of Arendt's little assertions here about the polis, is that the polis is not a physical thing. It exists purely as a relationship between multiple people, all right? And so this relationship is defined by the ability of these people to act and speak together. However, memes exist on the boundary between the real and digital realms. Like, that's the idea of the post-digital, and they come about through constant evolution and mutation. Now that's, I don't know if this might be a bit imperfect because I'm comparing, you know, a purely conceptual, not conceptual, but immaterial idea with something that is a bit more material, at least in the digital, in the real and digital realms. Maybe I should put here the idea of the in-group and out-group dynamic, although I do put it here. But memes, on a more accurate or more direct comparison with this network of human relationships, foster this idea of a in-group and out-group dynamic. You've heard thousands of times me saying it, in which, of course, they're united. They are a network of human relationships, just like the polis. And you can say it's where people act and speak together, although the notion of acting is something that is very specific to the Arendtian definition of acting. You know, it's one of those words that Arendt puts a new spin on in a philosophical sense. So we'll get to that right now. So what action is? It is where people meet and speak and reveal themselves. They deliberate. They use this notion of the polis to enact change in the political sphere through this act of meeting and talking amongst themselves and revealing themselves to others. And this is what constitutes political change. Now, memes are kind of different, because the spheres in which memes proliferate is fundamentally anonymous. So this goes back to something like meme stealing. So meme stealing was the rage, and kind of is the rage nowadays. But back in the day when memes were just in their infancy, yes, me, being the old person, I remember all this. Memes kind of were tied, not really tied, but there kind of was this notion of a meme being kind of tied to its creator, in the sense that if you were to screenshot it and download it or like repost it to others, you would say that's like, yeah, hey, that's meme stealing. And that kind of goes in tandem with other things like YouTube comments. You'd often see a YouTube comment being copied and pasted by another user, and people would say, hey, that's a comment, or this was done by a bot or something like that. But now it's like the lax rules of the internet mean that not only are memes just copied on a digital scale, such that meme stealing is practically just all over the place. It is kind of the fact that memes are not tied to their creators as they used to be. It was all about, I remember Schiefman's papers talked about this, where memes were constantly being reposted and shared willy-nilly without any regard for like citations. You know, you never have to cite a meme, right? So, you know, it's always this notion of anonymity, which goes into direct conflict with this act of revealing themselves. Like, action in the Arendtian sense always constitutes revealing oneself to this polis. And this goes a step further, because the digital sphere is kind of the space in which you are locked behind a screen. Not really locked, but like you are protected by the screen. I know there's all this about doxing and like revealing people's personal data. You know, people's personal data is kind of like intricately tied with their online selves, but still there is some difference between the person and how they are in the digital sphere. There, like, the whole notion of ironic memes is that, or like offensive memes, so to speak, is that you have this meme that says something just totally vile, something totally racist, like sexist, against all sorts of minorities, all that. But the person that made it doesn't think that. It's just they think that the ironic nature of the meme is funny. They like that it's so ironic. So I remember there's this expression called out of pocket, yes. They like it that it's so out of pocket, and that's what makes it funny. It's not a relatable meme in the sense that the person that made it is also deeply racist or sexist. So there is this difference between the person and the memes they create, or like the person and their presence on the online sphere. It's all this sort of difference, such that the person is never really revealed. So now the third one, freedom can only occur within the polis. And this goes in tandem with action. Namely, freedom you can understand as the ability to do action. So if you don't have freedom, it kind of means you can't really act in the Arendtian sense, meaning you can't meet with people, can't speak with them, and can't really reveal yourself to these people. I remember Hristova's article goes kind of into a bit of this, in that during the Occupy movement, when the online community was sharing all these memes of Occupy, what was happening was that the online community was creating this semblance of freedom or free will. Hristova describes it as like a semblance of like democracy. It's kind of like a mimicry of democracy, how the online community was sharing all these memes, although the real democracy, that like the real push for greater equality, that is the Occupy movement itself, was being crushed in an autocratic sense. Democracy, in the sense of the Occupy movement's push, was being suppressed. So democracy in the real world was being suppressed, whereas the online community felt that it had a sense of greater democracy through this rapid proliferation of memes, of this free will to just create, edit, and share memes willy-nilly. But this is a semblance of free will. That means, just like in the example in the Hristova article, the freedom that making and sharing memes brings is not equivalent to freedom in the political sphere, because as we said before, this digital world has is very much separating your personas such that action doesn't really appear. Another one is that the polis requires a difference in perspectives. We were going back to the notion of action, right? And this is where people meet and speak and reveal themselves, but it isn't really action if all these people have the same worldview or have the same opinions about something. Action is, the polis is sustained through action, but action between different people with different opinions. And this is kind of central to the notion of the polis, because it is precisely this different perspective that is being revealed through action. However, in memes, the in-group and out-group dynamics serve not to provide a difference in perspectives, but actually make people conform to the same perspective, right? Because remember, an in-group and out-group dynamic means that those in the in-group unite themselves over some common meme or game or whatever, but whatever dominant opinions are in there kind of like go through an echo chamber in which those opinions are kind of nurtured and everyone else is kicked out. So what happens is you've got these people that all believe the same thing, and now there is no difference in perspectives and there is no action. People have often speculated in the articles about the assassination of Charlie Kirk that the assassin, Tyler Robson, was part of some hyper online in-group that just kept on building their common opinions to the point where everything else, like social skills, perception, became calcified and their views became more extreme, which eventually led to them wanting to kill Charlie Kirk. And then we have a separation from necessity. So Arendt goes into this distinction between the public and private spheres, in which the private sphere is dominated by what is called labor. So labor is another one of those terms that she creates a unique meaning for, in which labor is the mere act of sustaining yourself biologically, in which you need food, you need water, maybe you need to exercise, sure. All those correspond to yourself sustaining yourself biologically, so it's not action, it's labor. And that's contained purely within the private sphere, in what, at least in the notion of public and private spheres that Arendt espouses. However, action is purely in the public sphere, meaning when you go into the polis, you leave all that stuff about sustaining yourself biologically at home. You then have to focus purely on how to, enact action, do all this stuff to sustain political action, right? In that sense, you can leave all that stuff about yourself as a biological human being at home, pretty much. However, and this is really key, Arendt also does not like it when the social sphere arises. So the social sphere is this mixing up of the public and private spheres. It's kind of blurring the lines between them. And this blurring of lines is not wanted because it involves all these things that we talked about. For one, it involves it doesn't involve multiple perspectives. It specifically involves the conforming of oneself to the masses. You wouldn't see someone you wouldn't see multiple people bringing out their different viewpoints. You would see everyone just conforming to the same opinion, and that is precisely to do with the in-group and out-group dynamics. And what other thing it does is that it substitutes action for something else called behavior. And behavior is it has a lot of the stuff that memes represent. Here, memes repeat themselves, they evolve, they proliferate, and behavior is all about repetition, kind of like biological repetition, right? So like kind of like the public and private spheres, they're mixing together means that people treat dealing with the public sphere like they would do the private sphere. So in the private sphere, it's all about constant repetition in order to sustain yourselves. You just need food, need water, next day, need food, need water, next day. And so in the public realm, it's kind of like memes, where you always share and repost, maybe edit a few things and share it. It's all about repeating actions, and it kind of becomes meaningless, basically. And memes are kind of meaningless in the grand scale of politics. And in a similar vein, it is very much anonymous. Memes are fundamentally anonymous, according to my board, in which in the private realm, it doesn't matter if you're like Abraham Lincoln, or if you're my neighbor, or if you're maybe even this the raccoon that lives in the sewers. You always need food and water, and like some other stuff, like maybe sunshine if you're a plant. But like you always need these basic needs, irrespective of who you are. And that anonymity in the private realm is kind of like translated to the public realm, in which, you know, memes proliferating is fundamentally anonymous. And so here, I give something else in regards to necessity, and that is the post-digital and the need for memes as a source of catharsis and relief among the hugely depressing nature of modern life and modern perception. Yeah. And finally, the last one I'll get to is that the polis is ephemeral. And I told you guys earlier that it is sustained through action. So if action is not done anymore, then the polis dies, right? However, in memes, it is true that each meme has a very short lifespan, and that is becoming even more true as time goes on. You often see memes with lifespans of mere weeks or days here. However, the presence of memes, I would argue, does not die out like individual memes die out. And that is because memes spread and proliferate on such a scale that any gap left by the dying of one meme is immediately taken up by another meme. Remember the 6-7 meme, how that was immediately followed up by the 41 meme. And so you don't get a break when it comes to memes, and such that, given that now there's a huge blanket of memes, like memes seem to be everywhere and like at every time, it gives you a level of constancy. At least the presence of meme gives you a level of constancy that kind of goes against this ephemeral nature of the polis. I know when you consider the whole thing, this nature of like being ephemeral isn't really like that groundbreaking when compared to the Arendtian notion of the action, but still, it kind of like cements the fact that memes and the polis are fundamentally different things. And you could even say that memes are very much like squarely in the social sphere that Arendt just does not like, in which, you know, public and private realms are mixed together, and behavior, mass behavior replaces individual and political action.